welcome to another edition of the Islandstats Sports Show. I'm your host, Earl Bearson, and joining me yet again is Jason Juggling J. Ford. Again, we're missing our third, and I know why, Jay. We'll get into that later on. As at the end
Well, I
of
know
this
why.
week,
I know why.
at the end of this week,
This
there's a lot
week,
of talk. But most of the talk over the last week has been the cancellation of the 2020 Cup Match Classic. Got a chance to speak to both presidents. But beforehand, give us your thoughts on the cancellation. Not of what the president said, just the cancellation.
it's a great miss. Not just the game itself, but the occasion itself, what it means to us as people here in Bermuda. And, it's the cancellation is one thing. Obviously, the health issues is one thing. But as we see, we're starting to open up a bit with other activities, um, like the march and a few other marches, I should say, and other sports starting to open up. You do understand the logistics of getting to put on a major event like that, the timetables to put things in place. But I've heard people on both sides saying, it would have been too much and then not to play with the fans. But then I heard the other side like, hey, I would have exhausted all the avenues that was possible. That's not to say that these presidents didn't do it, or I should say the host president didn't do it. But it's just one of those subjects that has never happened. And once again, we're in a time that presidents.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's hear from both presidents. Like I said, I got a chance to speak to both of them just to get their take on the decision that was made by the Somerset Cricket Club and the St. George's Cricket Club. Well, president of the Somerset Cricket Club, Rashawn Blanchard, yesterday the announcement came out that unfortunately the 2020 edition of the Cup Match Classic had to be cancelled. Must have been a tough decision for you and your committee. How did you guys come to that painstaking decision?
Yeah, afternoon, Earl. Thank you for having me on today. As you had stated, it was most definitely a very, very difficult decision. I know on a personal level, once that press release was sent, it was very gut wrenching. Having been somebody who grew up around Cup Match and over the years, someone who has gotten to understand the greater meaning of Cup Match. So it was very difficult. I think all of us at Somerset have an appreciation for what Cup Match means historically and what it means to our culture as Bermudians. It's arguably the most fastest time of the year for many people and a holiday that everyone definitely looks forward to. And it's a time when we all come together in unison and full of good vibes and good energy. So, it was very, emotionally, it was difficult to make, but I think ultimately because of the public health concerns, it was the right thing to do.
When you meet with your executive for the final time and then the decision's made, what was the night before this press release? Because you sent it out midday, but knowing that it had to come out, what was the night before like for you personally?
The night before, I was fine. Like I said, I think it was once we pressed sand. Once we pressed sand, then it really sunk in as to what was actually happening. The night before, I was, I guess, more fixated on making sure that the public relations strategy that we had in place went through without glitch, because obviously, as a courtesy, there were sponsors and stuff like that we felt necessary to notify before public release. And then we also wanted to, as a courtesy, obviously we notified our counterparts in St. George. We wanted to notify our members. So my whole focus in advance of the release wasn't so much as to the magnitude of the decision being made. It was making sure that everything went through seamlessly. We didn't want any sort of PR angles or anything like that.
One thing a lot of people don't realize is the magnitude of work that goes in to host Cup Match. that was a big consideration in as well as the health and safety of the people as well, wasn't it?
Well, I would say definitively health and safety was the distant way out in front main reason, but we also had to factor in the time that it would take to prepare the venue and things of that nature, and that was, I guess, sort of part of the reason we didn't make a public decision. We tried to give ourselves as much time as possible, but also being mindful of the time on the back end that we would need to get things in order. So we tried to find that right balance to make a decision whereby we've used the time to get as much information as possible, but on the other side, we haven't left ourselves short in terms of time to prepare things. But as stated, the health and safety was the driving factor that ultimately led to the decision that was made.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know it was a tough decision, not only for you guys, but for the country and those people around the world that love cup match itself.
Yes, for sure. I agree completely. But what I would add to that is that, in situations like this, we have to remain positive and optimistic and see the potential opportunities that lie in it. So for me, I think it's perhaps an opportunity for the people of Bermuda to, I guess, maybe understand the story behind cup match. I think, and I don't say this disrespectfully, I think to an extent we perhaps get a little bit caught up in the cricket and the rivalry that's associated with cup match. And with the decision that's now being made, it's maybe a good time to maybe press pause, reset the dial, and genuinely reflect on cup match and its true meaning. I mean, the fact that this is an event that has been around since 1902, obviously to commemorate the emancipation of slavery, and the fact that our forefathers basically persevered with this event for over 40 years before it actually received recognition as an official holiday. So it's a deeper meaning. And don't get me wrong, I'm gravely disappointed that we won't have the cricket and stuff this year, but it's a deeper meaning that maybe at this time we can genuinely reflect on and better understand as a country.
Neil Painter, president of St. George's Cricket Club. Oh, hold on one second. Let me just make sure I'm recording. Okay, yeah, I'm recording. Okay. All right, here we go. 3 and 2 and 1. Neil Painter, the president of St. George's Cricket Club. Obviously, the news coming out of the West End this year was that the Classic had to be cancelled. A little bit disappointing, obviously, because as the challengers, you're always looking for any opportunity to try and win back that trophy. But now you turn your attention to 2021 and what you will have to do to prepare. What is in the makings for St. George's for 2021?
Well, like as we speak, cup match is scheduled for in Wellington over in 2021. So once this decision was made, our committee will have to sit down in the next few weeks and start planning for 2021. Obviously, with this pandemic right here, fresh and now, we have to look at what the requirements are and how far we go in this pandemic. We'll sort of predict what types of things we'll be able to do in 2021.
Obviously, it's a big financial cost to put on a match like cup match, an event like cup match. The undertaking and missing out for a year, although it's year about, you still do a lot of preparations, even if you're not hosting it. So how does this affect St. George's Cricket Club?
Well, with it not being played this year, we are not really financially impacted. Obviously, being the non-host club, we don't have to spend any monies out, but we do receive some remuneration from Somerset as they would have been the host. We're the non-host club. But with preparations coming up for 2021, it'll be business as usual, where we create a budget, we set a plan out and create a budget, and then we work in stages or in phases as we move closer to the actual event.
What advice would you have offered to Somerset during this time to come up with this decision? Because it's kind of a joint venture, although they were the host.
Yeah, I mean, they were the hosts. It was at their field. They had to deliberate with their people and see what things can be put in place, and they came up with a decision. And yes, I supported that because we worked together. Because obviously, without Somerset or without St. George, there would be no cup match. So, if the shoe was on the other foot, which I told them, I don't envy the fact that it was, but I think we would have to really start early and sort of look at ways that we can have some sort of festivity activities, because firstly and paramount is the health and safety of our local citizens. So even though there is no match this year, we're still looking to commemorate those 2 days, because Cup Match is more than just the game; it's the event. And some people go to Cup Match not even to watch the match. Some people go to Cup Match just to be with friends, family, enjoy the atmosphere, and just celebrate what Cup Match is truly about. So if it was in my shoe, which I'm glad it's not, I guess, we might have made the same decision.
Well, Jay, we've heard from both presidents regarding the cancellation of this year's Cup Match. And after this past weekend, I'm glad the game has been called off, because I'm to the point where I don't want Cup Match to fall into even worse situations. We've had some dramatic scenes at Cup Match over the last few years where there's been altercations. We had an incident in St. George a few years ago where the players actually stopped playing the game to go over to ensure that their families who were sitting in that area were safe. And I just think now's not the time for all this nonsense that is going on. I would hate for Cup Match to be possibly dragged into it, because a lot of people will look at it and say, "Oh, here we go again."
I respectfully disagree.
You can.
Yeah, respectfully disagree. And I say this because you don't become prisoner to a few minorities that are causing the unruly behaviors. This game is over 116 years old. We know the first year the last game was abandoned because of an incident. And that did not stop the future 115, 16 more matches.
Right.
I know we're in sometimes, and not just socially here, but around the world, but what will be the difference? Could you guarantee me there will be something different next year?
No.
So I would think, like for this year, they would have a strategic plan along with the stakeholders to pull off a very, very secure event. Now, is any event 100% secure? No. Especially when we know there's alcohol involved. And that could be an NBA game, an NFL game, you can name it. That happens at the tailgate parties, anywhere else. You're always going to have an incident or two or three. As you know, I remember going to the Boston Gardens years ago. They actually have a jail. They had a jail in the arena.
Stadiums have a jail. All stadiums
have a jail in the arena. So, do you think that's a deterrent? Nope, because we are fooled by the end of the night. So, in saying that, for those reasons, I would not have. Now, is that where is this a teaching moment where we can teach some of our young folks the importance of Cup Match? Yes. Is this a teaching moment where I believe that both clubs, I know in the past few years, they've been doing a lot to collaborate with resources, but I've been one to say, we need these two clubs to come even closer together and form a company and make it one. It still feels a division between two clubs that are hosting the same event. The inconsistencies of, but okay, take for instance, the way Cup Match is set up. Yes, Earl, you're for St. George, I'm for Somerset. You do what you do in St. George, I do what I do in Somerset. Well, is that consistency? It doesn't go across the board when it comes to, like you said, these bad behaviors. Are we using the same strategies at both fields? We might be using the same, what I'm saying? So it's just consistency, I think, that we're lacking and across the board. Now, at the end of the day, these people who are doing these things is a very small minority. And they, to be honest, they have issues before cup match, and they'll have issues after cup match if they don't address their issues. But I don't think people who come to cup match to celebrate what cup match is about, to celebrate the game, to celebrate the players, to uplift the people, I don't think we should be prisoners on.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have more of the Islandstats Sports Show. Well, Jay, last week we had some passionate words, even from our co-hosts, Gary Moreno and yourself, as well as myself, on the issue of CrossFit and their statement made following the CEO of CrossFit posting online, calling it Floyd 19 instead of COVID-19. This after George Floyd was murdered. Their statement on the website, which said that they were looking into their next move, or I don't want to get it quoted wrong, but as they mentioned, they are just waiting or weighing their decision. It still remains today. I did not see any new statements posted, but over the course of this time, it's got to be kind of worrying for anyone that has not distanced themselves. As I've looked around other CrossFit organizations in the Caribbean, and they have all literally thrown their hands up and said, we will not be a part of this. You know, we'll look to form something else, but we won't be a part of it.
I hate to say this, Earl. Sometimes things come down to a conscious effort, and then things come down to a financial effort. And the membership, I'm pretty sure they put enough pressure on the powers that be, then change will happen. Until sometimes you have to affect people in the pocket to make change if they don't have the moral compass. And to make statements like this, you started to question about that moral compass. But in saying that, sometimes you got to hit them in the pocket, whether it be a lack of membership, lack of sponsorship. That normally starts to go towards change. And I say that because we last week we did talk about the NASCAR, the movement in NASCAR. Obviously, news has come out now that a lot of sponsors were going to pull because they were backing the drivers. And the drivers had to more compass in place, but then, the powers that be, we've heard it before,
Right.
and they did not act on it. What Bubba said it had been said before. They just didn't act on it. But now with the major companies and talking about coming out of this, pulling out, that's made the difference.
A huge difference. This past weekend, Jay, we would have been celebrating what many would have in the past would have said the first boating weekend of the year with the Heroes Day celebration of the Edward Cross long distance race, as well as fitted dinghy racing in Mangrove Bay, but both fell victim to yet another sport falling victim to the COVID-19 and the restrictions. The sailors, obviously in the comic class, as well as the fitted dinghies, will have to be in close contact to one another, which right now the government has still deemed not safe. And the unfortunate thing is both events had to be postponed. Years and years of an event.
Yeah, it's listening to some of the public going on about when you hear about the regulations, but then you see other events that are, for a better term, a lack of social distancing, and you see some of these events being handcuffed due to the restrictions. Another event that was a cricket event that was canceled this week was the Western Counties Series this year,
Yes.
Based off, once again, the restrictions. How could they have a series, and not so much not only the restrictions, but having the timetable to get they have a 4-match series, unlike Eastern County where there's a 3-match series. And actually, they were due to start, I would have said, about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
The
first weekend in July.
Yeah, if not the end of June, first week of July. So, in saying that, they're baffled because when you see a march with 7,000 plus people, when you see the pictures that folks are not adhering to social distancing, but they are trying to, be respectful of what they've been told, what's been put in place, and it becomes frustrating for the organizers. It becomes frustrating for the membership because obviously players want to play,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to to tell them no, because you see it, you actually see it.
Yeah.
So it's been, like I said, with the sailing thing, and once again, we're talking, and Earl, you know more about the history of the sailing here on our island. We're going back a long time.
Yeah.
This is going back a long time.
We're 80 odd years into the Edward Cross long distance race and several years into the fitted dinghy race. The fitted dinghies would have started, they just recently in the last, I believe, 4 or 5 years moved their actual start date from 24th of May or Bermuda Day to the first Sunday after that event. And they would have already started their season. And another highlight of the season is a day like today where it's deemed a holiday, and it's a lot of people that are on the water that don't normally get to see the fitted dinghies. Also, this would have been the start of the Comet Class International Regatta as well that Bermuda was due to host. The race would have, the long distance race would have come up to the West End, and the racing for the Comet Class would have been in the West End as well. So it would have all had an international, the Edward Cross race would have had an international flavor because some of the guys were planning to actually take part in it. We've had overseas sailors take part in the Edward Cross race before and even win it. I believe, yes, they win it. So it would have added another dimension to a special day on the waters of Bermuda. But unfortunately, again, we'll have to wait till 2021 because Bermuda did retain the fact that they will host the International Comet Regatta in Bermuda next year. So if all goes to plan, we'll have the Comet race, and then we'll have the international regatta next year.
I don't want to sound crazy, but these races are not seasonal, right?
Which ones?
The Edward Cross and the Fitted Dinghy.
Yes,
These two
they
places.
are.
They are seasonal.
They
I'm
are
just trying.
seasonal. Yes, yes. So
Okay.
the Comet class generally race between May and September.
Okay.
And so does the Fitted Dinghy. Fitted dinghies are every 2 weeks. The Comet class kind of, because remember there's three clubs in the Comet class, and they host regattas at their clubs, or they all come together and do big regattas at a particular club. So the way it's done, it's scheduled for the season, and they go from there. Now, having said that, if there is some sailing on board that comes up near the end of the year, depending on how many races they get in, they might lobby each other to have the flagpole to flagpole, which starts at the Hamilton flagpole and finishes at St. George's flagpole. That's usually the week of Bermuda Day.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they could turn around and have the Edward Cross long distance race as well. So um, there's all sorts of possibilities, but it's just everybody agreeing to how to move forward. Some guys might decide this year's a waste. I don't want to spend time on my boat. I want to get back to work and make some money, or let me take my frustrations out there on the water and beating up some guys that I usually don't get a chance to beat up. So it's one of those things where a lot of talk has to take place.
One more question for you now. So, like a lot of these other competitions, they're held at a different venue every year. One year it's going from east to west, then next year is west to east. What's going to happen next year? Has it been
Well,
anywhere?
that will be up to the Comet Class Committee. The way in which they designed it for this year, in order to have all the boats at the West End, was the smart thing, because the International Regatta was starting there. So maybe they may just do the same thing again and have that, because you don't want to have people trucking the boats up the road. So what they do is they try to make sure that all the boats are in an area that is easily manageable to have that international regatta, which the lawn of the West End Sailboat Club will be packed for that week after that race, because even the overseas guys' boats will be on island.
Mm-hmm.
So we look forward to a special week of sailing, and those folks that were all out for the America's Cup that said they love sailing. There's an opportunity next year on the Great Sound to witness some of the world's best Comet sailers. That includes Bermuda sailers who have won this event repeatedly, between the likes of Stephen Dickinson and Rudy Bailey. I believe Bailey is the reigning champion. He won the title in the States last year, and obviously this year, I'm not sure if they're going to still have it, but well, they won't, because it's canceled in Bermuda. So he'll be the title holder and defender if he decides to.
On home waters.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny because Rudy doesn't sail a lot in Bermuda. And you would see him at the Edward Cross long distance race, and then you won't see him, and then you'll hear he's at the international. There's a lot of to and fro as far as reasons why. I mean, everybody has their own way of doing things and deciding how they're going to do things. If that's how he feels to do it, that's how he feels to do it. But then comes the opportunity, like you said, to sail on home shore, and also the fact that he will have quite a few Bermudian sailors in the boats. Over the past few years, we've had probably 6 or 7 boats in the fleet in the internationals, and even Peter Brumby has taken up the Comet class internationals at times. So it'll be interesting to see if he decides to get involved, or even some other local guys who don't sail the class but love sailing. There's an opportunity.
I think that opportunity is gonna be too hard to resist.
Oh yeah, definitely. Winning on your own shore, winning an international event, it will feel real good for anybody that kind of participates, and especially if a Bermudian wins it. So we look forward to that next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back with more Islandstats Sports Show after this message from our sponsor. Good day, Mr. Springer. Another week of sports resuming all around. We know that the West Indies have settled in England. Can't wait for July 8th. Also, what else is starting to brew up in Antigua?
Good day, Earl Basden. This is Vernon Springer from the Point FM timeout program in St. John's, Antigua. Just reporting to the folks all over Bermuda and all over the world. In the wake of the killing of George Floyd in the United States of America, the National Football League, a league that has wrestled with racial issues for years, has shown unusual unity. Players, coaches, league officials, and owners have expressed sadness, remorse, and a commitment to seek solutions to police violence against African American people and other forms of social injustice. But the big question being asked all around the world is the specter of Colin Kaepernick, which still looms large over any conversation of football and race. As the league grapples with the next steps to take, many players are indicating and are waiting on the NFL to address the Kaepernick situation. He began in 2016 kneeling during the national anthem of the United States of America to protest police brutality towards African Americans, if his newfound progressive stance is to be viewed as legitimate. Let us all as journalists look around the Caribbean and look around the world and unite as one against racism in sports. But what else is happening in the Caribbean in terms of sports? I can tell you that in Antigua and Barbuda, a big major talking point has been the merger of the Antigua and Barbuda Pro Racing and the Antigua and Barbuda Drag Racing Association. Those bodies have now come together, and that in itself has been a growing and emerging sport in Antigua and Barbuda. Around the rest of the Caribbean, everybody is almost very cautious in terms of how they're going to get back involved in team sports. So the question still looms around in the Caribbean. When is football going to start? When are we going to have athletics? Basketball has been given the green light. Golf has been given the green light. So many other sports. But everybody is more or less just cautious and just playing it very, very, very safe in terms of what is going to be happening. In terms of a number of the federations coming out to support what is happening with this social injustice and this racism and all of the protests around the entire world, NACAC has also come out with their own statement. Mike Sands has been able to view his own thoughts on how they see the whole spectrum of this going forward. There's a united front where a number of Caribbean athletes are also concerned about the drug testing, even on the international global scene, where testing for athletes is almost very cautious. And based on what has been happening with the social distancing, a number of athletes are almost very much concerned. Can we stop the drug cheats? That is going to be another big question, which we personally have to look to be able to find out. But as sports begin to be able to make sure that it comes back into the beam on the international circuit, the English Premier League, golf is on the way. We know the NBA basketball is going to be resuming all around. I can say to you, as journalists, we have to be able to stand up now and make sure that we make a difference by going on the ground, going into the respective communities, identifying the issues that are affecting sports and bring them out. This is Vernon Springer from Antigua and Barbuda saying, Guide, let's try and see if we could be able to make sure that we can make a difference in sports as sports journalists around the region.
Good day, Anne-Marie. We see over in England where a story is brewing between Kamal Roach and Archer of England, both from Barbados. I'm just wondering what that series would mean for people from Barbados as they see Archer now starring for England. And also other sports are starting to really, really get going in Barbados. What are things looking like on the ground as we draw nearer to some resumptions?
Hi, Earl. It is always my pleasure to hear from you. And, once again, it's good to give you some insight as to what is going on sporting wise in Barbados. And before I speak to what's happening here on the island, I must address the first part of your question, which is this back and forth between Kemar Roach and Jofa Archer, just to get an understanding. The West Indies are currently in England. They are in a biosecure environment, meaning there's limited contact with the public, limited staff, and they're actually living and training in this facility in preparation for the first test of the 3-test series against England, and that first test is expected to ball off on July the 8th. When you speak of Kemar Roach, he is a staple bowler within the West Indies bowling attack. He is the pacer that everybody is looking to reel in the wickets, and he always has a really good stat, sheet against England. On the opposite end, there's Jofa Archer, who is England's go-to fast bowler, the speedster in their bowling attack, who is Barbadian just like Kemar Roach. Just to give a little background on Jofa actually played up to under 19 level here on the island and for the West Indies. He played 3 matches for the West Indies at the under 19 level before he went over to England, and he chose to go to England based on his family roots. So he opted to play for England. He got his first break at the 50 over World Cup last year, was very, very instrumental in the English side actually winning that World Cup. To be honest, he is the person who bowled the super over to give them the victory and for them to lift the World Cup. So he immediately sprung to the fore during that World Cup. And I think that's when Bajans actually got up and noticed that, he existed. For Barbados, he is still very much one of us. And the thing about it is with Kemar is that what Kemar is saying to Jofa is, we can't be friends. There's no friendships in the match. Let me get that straight. But there's no love lost. I'm here in England. I've come to play and I've come to win for the West Indies. So basically, it is not a deep-rooted lack of friendship that's happening there. Just to be even more cognizant of the fact that as a Barbadian, And Joffrey is not only a Barbadian, but he is always at home. He always comes back to Barbados in his spare time. And he has friends on the West Indies team. He's very close to batsman Shea Hope, very close to bowler Shamar Holder, and he would have played with Alzari Joseph and Preston McSwain at the under-19 level for the West Indies. So he is very much an active West Indian at the end of the day. So what Kemar is saying to him is, when it comes to the day of play on the field, I am taking no friendships. We are competitors. We're going to compete. I came to England for the West Indies to win. I'm going to do my job as a bowler. Good luck, buddy. To you too. I hope you do your job. And, it's all about winning and playing great cricket for Roach. So when he sent out those words, it was more like game on, buddy, to Joffrey. So it is basically, Joffrey is still very much one of us. He's Barbadian, he's West Indian. We definitely don't forget that. And it's just about playing on the day. And Kemar is just reminding him, look, I am here on business. Friendships will happen after this 3-test series is over. So the back and forth banter is very strong there. Speaking about Barbados and sports, everything was reopened as of yesterday. All sports were given the green light to go ahead, obviously with some considerations. Each federation or each organizing committee or each person who plays a sport is responsible for their health and safety. COVID-19 is still very much active out there in the environment that we operate in. So therefore, the health restrictions, the safety restrictions, the type of play that occurs, all these things are now to the federations, but the government is saying you are free now to conduct all sporting activities, but obviously with the mindfulness that you have certain protocols that still have to be in place to ensure the safety and health of your athletes and competitors. So no federation so far has stepped up and said they're going to resume a competition or resume a league or any of the competitive nature of sports. Training has obviously started back, but obviously with limited restrictions across the sports. And I'm going to zoom in especially to our netball team. The under-21s during COVID-19 lockdown learned that they had qualified for the Youth World Netball Cup in Fiji as of next year. Now, this was especially, important for the under-21s. They were going through the qualifying process at the time when COVID-19 basically shut down netball around the world. So what the International Netball Federation did, which is IFNA, what IFNA did is that they used the rankings of the senior teams to then say, well, you are then or to given an automatic space based on the ranking. So Barbados, being in the top 10, was able to secure a spot at the Youth World Cup. So the under-21 team has been training individually. Now that the lockdown has been lifted and the restrictions have been lifted on sports, the under-21s, what has happened is that the only persons really going out to train literally out and not keeping up their fitness individually are the shooters. So the shooters are actually going out and taking shots at the pole, etc. But obviously with the restrictions of having to wash your hands and, you only one player used one ball and not necessarily pass to the other player, you still keep your distance, which is quite fine for the shooters. If one shooter is on one end of the circle, the other is on the next. And the president of the Netball Association, Nisha Craigbell, said that, she's really pleased that the government has given the green light to her sport. But given that netball is a contact sport, she still believes that there are risks out there. So they're continuing the home training program to keep the girls fit. But then obviously they're going to look at, how they operate as a team or a unit. That has to be worked out. So basically, Barbados is up and running to some level of normalcy. Everything has been reopened. All businesses, schools have reopened, but only for the class 4s who are actually getting ready to take their common entrance exam, which allowed them to transition from primary to secondary school, to the 5th formers who are doing their CSEC examinations and CXC examinations, and the 6th formers who are doing their A-levels as well. The Barbados has reopened, but from a sports perspective, everyone is given the green light. But some sports are still, clamping down and taking precautions until an all clear is given, because Barbados is not yet in the all clear. So basically, that's it from Barbados. We are back in sports mode, even if not to normalcy, and we're all looking to England to see how well the West Indies will do against their English side as they do that 3-test series. So that's it for me this week, and I do wish you guys a wonderful week ahead.
Well, Jay, sports returned to Bermuda this past week. We had two events, funny enough, both at the same establishment, the Fairmont Southampton. Actually, no, it did not. I'm sorry. No, it did not. Because the golf took place at the Mid Ocean Golf Club. The Bermuda Professional Golf Association restarted their season with Kamiko Smith and Derek Douglas winning that in what they called a senior and a junior professional event. So those guys got back out on the golf course and started, getting back into their flow. They have another tournament coming up in a matter of weeks. I believe it is next week, Wednesday, at the Port Royal Golf Course. So hopefully we can get some more information regarding that. But then it was a week full of tennis at the Fairmont Southampton, where the Mendes Tennis Management COVID Championships took place. On Saturday, we saw the ladies' final that featured Kirsten Soltis and Morgan Lightbourne, and then the men's final that featured Gavin Mendes and Tariq Simons. Um, both matches were very entertaining, evenly matched opponents for Morgan and Kirsten. That was a three-set battle. Kirsten coming out on the good side of and claiming the number one ladies seed. In doing so, of course, the other match, the men's match, saw a repeat of the final that took place in January between Gavin and Tariq. And Gavin was determined to try and do one better. Obviously, during the January tournament, he was fighting bronchitis throughout the event. But again, the youngster, the student, took hold of the teacher. Um, got a chance to speak with all four um, after their matches. Let's get a touch of the both interviews for the finalists of the Manders Tennis Management's COVID championships?
Morgan, you put yourself in a very tough position because you had quite a few three setters in the tournament. Going into the final, did you think fatigue would play a part in it?
Yeah, that's always the case. I wasn't planning on doing any of those three setters, but they happened. So it definitely made the journey a little more tough. But I think I hung in there. Honestly, I didn't feel that it was more of a fitness thing, more so a mental battle for me. So I guess I'm at least happy about that.
Kirsten, you come from a background of doing plenty of sports, but most of your previous sports were team sports. Now you're doing an individual sport. How does that change for you mentally? Because physically, a lot of it plays a good part, but how does that change for you mentally?
That's a very good question. I really couldn't tell you. I've always been a team player, but even when it comes to tennis, when we do travel as a team, Barbados teams, when we do go out, it's still the same concept. But being on court by yourself and having to not have feedback when you're going between a quarter, for example, when it was netball, it can get challenging, and I do get into my own head, and I don't know. That's a tricky one. I guess it's just learning progress.
Morgan, what brings you back out to play a sport that you were quite good in years ago, but now you're returning to? Why the return?
I guess I had it in my mind. So I started back up last year around this time, and I just had it in my mind, and I don't know, just a series of events kind of led me to this. I didn't think it would get to where we are now, but it is, and I'm glad, and I'm happy, and I'm enjoying it to the most.
What did you miss about it the most during the time out that has now gotten you feeling like I made the right decision to come back?
Well, I actually was playing a lot of squash. After I stopped playing tennis, I kind of got into squash a little bit, and that was fun. But tennis was always my first love, so I just felt like I wanted to give it another shot, especially since I didn't take it to the level that I could have or should have when I was younger. So I just felt like it's another opportunity to at least give it my best shot.
Kirsten, when you look at what you've been able to achieve in such a short space and time in playing tennis, because it's only been, 5 years, if that, are you surprised? A little bit long. Okay, 6 years. Are you surprised?
9 years. No. Surprised. Kind of, sort of, yes. But I guess I'm a little hard on myself, and I expect a lot, and my expectations are high. So setting the bar high, I think it just forces me to keep reaching for it. And then when I don't reach for it, it's almost like a setback in a sense. But I'm learning to adjust with that as well.
When you look at overall accomplishments of what you've been able to achieve in the sport, does Saturday's final kind of say to you, I could push myself further, I can go through the pain, I can go through everything and still come out okay in the end?
Yes, for sure. Definitely think that I can keep pushing, and it will keep pushing me, as well as I hope we push each other, because, tennis for ladies right now isn't where we want it to be, but I know that it's going to get there.
Morgan, losing in the final, obviously you say you just come back, you've only been back a year, but getting to a final, but losing it, does that make you more determined as a player to get into the next competition and try to go one better?
Absolutely. I'm really motivated, and Karsten keeps me motivated. It's nice to have some good competition here as well. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. All of this has been a very difficult process, but like I said, I'm just enjoying every moment of it, just trying to soak it up. And we're just going to keep on pushing. Like, I was at practice this morning at 9. I ran before that. I'm not stopping.
Tariq, as the champion, Take us through your match, because once again you found yourself down 3-0 in the first set, but calmly got yourself back into it.
Yeah, it was a test of whether or not I could hold my nerves or not. Waiting for opportunities. I was only down one break, so I tried to look at it with a positive mindset, and I think I did that pretty well considering how aggressive Gavin was when we had just started. But yeah, I think I did well to get back in it and come through and win the first set. It was a mental battle as much as it was physical, and yeah, I think I dealt with it pretty well.
Gavin, it was back in January when you guys played the singles championship final, and you were up 3-love in that first set as well. Were you talking to yourself to ensure that the mistakes you made in January you weren't going to make again?
Nah, I mean, I didn't really think about January at all, to be honest. January is just a different time. It was a lot going on then for myself. I just like to come out and bring the intensity early. That's something that I've picked up over the years from my experience. It just so happened that, I mean, you know, I coach him, so I coach and help him learn how to deal with those nerves. So he was able to stop that momentum that I had. Normally, if I go up 3-0, chances of me winning that first set are pretty good. So, I mean, it's kind of one of them things. Is the focus that I had was there, but he was able to hold that momentum and yeah, just turn it around. Really,
You fight back to lead 4-3, and then Gavin breaks your serve. What are you saying to yourself to ensure that, because the very next you break him back to take a 5-4 lead? So how are you making sure you stay focused, and the fact that you're able to break right back to take that lead?
there's a number of things really. I had to observe Gavin and what he was doing on the court. He might have been changing something because at 4-all, it's pretty much an even playing ground unless one person is more tired or mentally fatigued than the other. But it's pretty much all up for grabs, and whoever deals with the pressure best at that time or takes the opportunities to get aggressive or in some situations get lucky. Yeah, whatever pays off, you have to find a way and deal with whatever comes to it.
Gavin, you lose that first set. What are you telling yourself in between the two sets, getting ready for that second one?
I mean, for me personally, I had a little tweak at the end of the first, so it was just trying to figure out a new game plan under the new circumstances. I mean, it's an ever-changing thing out there in general. And you know, once that happened, I had to, you know, throw out my entire game plan and come up with a totally new one under the new circumstances. So for me, once he won that first, you know, it was like, you know, dig in, like championship mode. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on with your body right now. You need to tune in. You need to figure out a new game plan. You need to go to plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F, and just try to figure out a way to get to 3-0. That's all my goal was in the second set, was to get to 3-0, get to 4-0. So I put myself in the match. And I mean, that's where I was and that's where my mind was. But at the end of the day, he was able to kind of hold his nerves. And I left it all out there. That's all I could ever ask of myself. And, you know, while on that break, I also had to figure out when I wanted to use my medical timeout because, you know, I was ailing in that area. So, you know, a lot of those things were going through my mind from a strategic and how do I, you know, not let this go just because of some circumstance that came up.
When you look at how you want to play, I notice a lot of times you were taking your extra time between rallies to kind of slow down the procedures. Was that sort of a game plan once he got himself back into that first set?
Yeah, I mean, normally, depending on where the momentum is, you want to try to control the pace of a match. You know, that's another battle that goes on at the higher levels that a lot of people don't understand.
And especially once I had the little tweak, I needed to give myself time to relax and allow the muscles to relax a bit, because I was starting to compensate in other areas. So I started to get a little pain in some other areas. But yeah, it was just to give myself time to get ready for that next point and play at the pace that I wanted to, and try to impose whatever will that I had to be able to use. And so that was the thought process behind that while going through that.
Well, Jay, you've heard from both the men and the ladies. What's your thoughts? You could start off with the ladies. What's your thoughts?
I always start with the ladies, bro. Come on now.
Just thought I'd help you out.
Yeah, it's actually good to see the ladies back in action. Obviously, the ladies is not as fruitful as you were saying the men's side. But to see these ladies trying to get back out there, obviously I've been following Morgan Lightbourne for a little while, especially with her return, and a lot of work she's put in. And you see that the youngster, you see the future that's coming. And it's gonna be the more and more they play, obviously they're gonna get better in their skills. You see the struggles that both players can have at times. They talked about it while they're trying to keep their head, or while they're trying fitness or whatever, and that will come in playing more, especially more competitive matches. So I just want to commend, first of all, the MTN for putting on the tournament, but there needs to be more tournaments. There need to be more action, because that's the only way these players are going to improve. The battle that these lot had, if Morgan come back and hadn't been out for so long, I know her motivation was just to, and I think what happens a lot of times, a lot of our tennis players got into the game so early, and via after school or after college, I won't say they burn out, but there's other things that they decide to do. And then all of a sudden, I still love tennis. Let me go back.
You heard her say that. You heard her say that she wanted to get back. Yeah.
Some now, the difference is now, and it'll be a good transition to the men's. The difference is there's a youngster behind you now.
Oh yeah.
So the mental, the physical, it plays a big part, because once your body gets tired, we all know where your head goes after that.
Yeah.
And slide over to the men's. I think that's we had talked about the last we talked about the last tournament those two had, or even the episode before this with Tariq Simons and Gavin. And you're hearing Gavin, I hate to say this, but you're starting to hear nagging injury here, or a little something here, and a little something there. Now, that's what I was going to say. If we was outside of the boat, you say, hey, mate. Hey, mate.
Never felt those no niggles before, did you?
Tariq probably going to play another 3 set right afterwards, Whereas he needs an ice bath and a massage and a good night's sleep. But I think because you said the teacher, so I think it probably made it a little bit easier. And you listen to Tariq, he's used to playing Gavin.
Mm-hmm.
So where Gavin might have a mental edge over other players who doesn't come underneath his camp, because they're thinking, Gavin Mendes has been the number one for so long, all these things go into place. Whereas Tariq learned through him. And you can hear with Gavin saying that, a lot of things that I was teaching him, he was actually putting into place on me. So,
and when they start doing that, you can't stop it.
Yeah, and so, but how good the program is, because you can see he's actually putting that into place.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that COVID has hit at the time it has hit for this youngster, because I think this is the time where he just needs to get off the island as soon as possible to get to that next level.
Yeah.
But in saying that, him keeping positive, he sees a positive young man. He loves the game. I've watched him even coach little ones.
Right.
So he loves being around the tennis courts, and he has the mindset to go further. So as far as Gavin's going to say, obviously he's not going to, it's not passing on the torch yet.
Not gonna lay down.
Well, we've heard that from a lot of other players. I don't know if there's ever
That's
been a
called
quote.
seasoned talk.
I never. Is there a ceremony that actually happens? I've never really been invited to the ceremony where we actually pass the torch. It gets to a point that, okay, you're 2-0 now. The line, then it gets 3-0 and 4-0. It's like, okay. Yeah. But I'm just saying, Gavin, I know you got something in you, but I don't know how much. Next week it might be the arm or the ankle or, Tariq's not going to want to hear none of that. No, but it's glad that once again, through all of this, we're staying active. And you got to look at these guys. We be obviously looking forward to seeing more of the likes of Trey Mallory and the rest of these youngsters get more involved, even with the seniors. Right. But to see these guys get back to, we were following Daniel overseas, I believe in Spain. Yeah. Shout out to my man Sam Mabry from Roots.
Roots Tennis.
Roots Tennis, because he's always giving us updates of young Daniel. Yeah. So obviously, I would love to see these guys come back and have this tournament and just to see, as fans, as sports fans, to see what we are producing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jay, earlier today, the English Premier Division returned. Earlier today was Aston Villa and Sheffield United, and then Man City and Arsenal. I know you're not worried about either one of those two games, because come Friday, the man that's missing is taking you on.
He's always running, so why is he always running? I don't understand.
Well, come Friday, you will both be, I guess, texting each other. Did you see that?
He's looking to catch me, so I guess, because he maybe still got to get us back from the early part of this year. But
That's right.
I mean, I wish him.
I didn't dream that the you two would be meeting this early in the restart. Well, I know for Mr. Moreno, I'll speak on his behalf right now that come next week, Wednesday, if there's a W for Tottenham on Friday, he will be full of smiles on Wednesday. Now, having said that, if there's a L, it may be another loose spot up here on the screen.
You know he will be back here next week. Yeah, he's got some gardening to do or something. I don't know. Yeah,
glory, Man United.
Gotta go walk the dog or something. I don't know. He'll come up with something. He's very creative.
Oh well, you're never a journalist without being creative. Because you're always, no matter where you go after, you're always a journalist.
Most definitely.
Well, before we go, Jay, I know one of the things that's been on your mind has been, as we start the show, we'll end the show, Cup match, and what will happen in 2021. In the interview, the president of St. George's Cricket Club has indicated that they've already or will be starting their preparations very soon. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's something that, you can see both sides. Some folks will say, some probably deserve a chance to still host it. Mm-hmm. And, for next year. And you saw Eastern Counties do that with Barbados. But Eastern Counties is a different animal because Eastern Counties is actually a group that goes to a field.
Right.
So that's a little bit different. But you also understand from the St. George's side also that, our preparations are our preparations every other year. And, we do what we have to do. So, but once again, I think that this will be rectified if it was one company. Because you hear from the president of St. George's, yes, they do get some money from not being the host club.
Right.
But I think it's both of the product. It's their product. Mm-hmm. So I think they should be probably sharing in not only expenses but also the revenue that's coming in. But that's another story for another day. It'll be interesting what decision comes out. I believe there's a meeting regarding that. There's some of those few issues. Right now, I probably expect it to be in St. John, actually.
Well,
And that's I probably expect it. I mean, I would love for it to go back to Somerset. And for me, I hate to say this here, I go back to the history side of it. I would hate to change the pattern of it, because it's just easy for me to remember. Even years up Somerset or years down to Georgia.
well,
it up now.
Yeah, well, it would go wherever it's going to be, no matter what. 2021.
You tell me, what would you do? What would you do?
More than likely, I would move it to St. George, and not just because I'm a St. George supporter. For me, it keeps it that year about. That's what they decided. That was agreed, because who's to say that come we don't have COVID-19 in 2021 and the game is canceled again? Because we could still put it back to Somerset, and then the same thing happened. And then do you say, okay, well, Somerset gets a foot, So I think having the year about, it was decided amongst the clubs. Let's just stick to that and move on from there.
And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if some of that played into the decision that they made too, because the money that the clubs are going to obviously lose from already putting things into place already. Some say they're putting in place together. And how far do we go of the finances or going in the hole per se for an event that may or may not happen, depending on what happens in the next month? Because I think I've heard this not only with the folks from Somerset and St. George, but also other events that have been canceled. Who's to say we do not get another wave in another month?
Right.
So it's like, how far do we go down the road and let this linger on, when then eventually we'll probably end up canceling? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's there's so much unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say, once again, it's just be fair to talk it out.
Yeah.
Talk it out.
All right. Well, Jay, thanks for joining me for another edition of the Islandstats Sports Show here on Islandstats.com. Who are you looking for,
Thanks.
Gary?
Yeah.
Gary's a wanted man. Folks, have a good night.